GM, everyone. Hope you all are having a wonderful start to May. It has been an interesting, what's it been now? Roughly 14 days, almost essentially, 13 days or so of post rune life. And that post rune life still a little bit depressing, unfortunately. All of our bags are indeed bleeding here, unfortunately, in May. It definitely feels like seppuku, as we seem to be going in a very bad direction overall, as just clearly the technology and the experience and the liquidity didn't really align. And there were a handful of reasons for that. But I think, what becomes really the largest issue is that the market is struggling to find conviction on where to rally in general. There's no single winner. There's really only been small winners, right? And most of these small winners tend to be very short lived. As exciting as Wenko Manko runes may have been, if you were able to get in there early, let's be honest, compared to other shit coins that we may see on other chains, it doesn't even compare. It's so small, it's a blip. And that's kind of the general issue we're running into. And as exciting as it may be seeing Dog at a 350, 380 million market cap, again, still bearish when we knew the ordinal asset was trading at 800 and 850 million market cap at one point in the market. So, of course, market conditions have changed. We see variables changing. But it doesn't mean that we can't be disappointed, right? And it's fair to be disappointed in where the experience has been thus far. And to be very honest, I think the person who's probably most disappointed is probably Casey. I don't know if $1 billion token is going to happen within the next 18 days. He's got a tough countdown here. His goal is to have $1 billion token at least within the first 30 days. I'm not sure if that's likely right now. The only outlier still remains is Binance. Binance still the only outlier in this market that can really move. We've seen essentially a lot of these elements kind of coming in that, still there are very profitable plays coming into ordinals, but the challenge again still just comes is that the product experience isn't there for meme coins. And I think that's actually a bullish and a bearish thing to understand. The reason why, of course, it's bearish, as we can all probably recognize, is the fact that we don't get short-term degen money flipping over. There's no reason for short-term degen money to be flipping over. This game is way easier and interesting to play this on, honestly, Solana. To be very honest, Ethereum mainnet is an amazing product experience for this right now when you look at the Gwei. I mean, remember, Ethereum's hit Gwei. I think I saw Gwei down to 3 at one point, which is kind of mind-boggling. But at the same time, right, we're looking at the same factors, that the activity is also slowing on ordinals and runes in general. And this is probably one of the more bearish elements we want to look at. But let's look at that data real quick, and then we'll talk about how to size this market, because there is a very large bullish element. And the bullish element is that this is probably going to make a lot of the market go away and miss what we think the larger opportunity is, which of course is Bitcoin infrastructure. And this is kind of where we want to talk about how that will scale and build and why we want to be bullish on it. And we'll talk about that with more comparables on this, and showing you how to size up the market. The other thing we'll talk about is how we'll structure this moving forward, starting next week with all of our live farming classes and online kind of modules to kind of help educate. We'll talk through that here as well. But let's quickly jump to one of my favorite things, which is Dune dashboards. I'll share this here, but I'm also screen sharing it myself. You should all pin this. This is something you should always have in your back pocket. This is a Dune dashboard built for runes by Crypto Corio. He's done a really good job showcasing what the landscape is and, more importantly, where this volume is. So I want to walk you through some of the elements that are bullish and bearish in these charts, so you just have a little bit of an understanding of what we should expect as the trends going on. So here, what we're seeing is that, before a halving world, right, before runes essentially, right, we're looking at the majority of these transactions kind of averaging around 400, 350K transactions per day is kind of the average here in the middle. And of course, halving comes in around this point here on April 19th / April 20th. And we could see a massive injection of a new category here determined by this, reddish pink color in runes. And runes just blows up in terms of the number of transactions, right? We hit a very large point. We're almost doing, a total of over 900,000 transactions in a given day, right? This is huge. This is exciting. This is bullish. But at the same time, what we saw is that it slowed down the volume of all the other asset classes as well, whether it be ordinals, BRC20, or just general BTC as a full infrastructure. And we can see that even more when we start looking at the share of the transactions. We can see it eat into it. And you could actually look, if we look very closely into the chart, you can see BRC20 and ordinals losing tons of volume. They get cannibalized here. And this is where it gets even more bearish, is that as Runes cannibalizes those two asset classes, so does Runes get, kind of self-cannibalized, as we see a volume massively dropping off right now here when it comes to the transactions of Runes. And there's a few different types of transactions. We could talk about fees, and of course you can see how crazy fees were for the initial few days. But what we're generally seeing is that this isn't even hitting the goal of what I think Casey wants long term, right? And this is kind of what you want to recognize, is that even when you look at this, the fees are kind of dwindling now. Why can we know fees are dwindling? Well, we could go to our favorite, mempool or ord pool here. And as you can see, fees are low. We're in 20, 30 sat fees. This is probably where we could kind of interact with pretty much everything in Bitcoin with fairly nominal costs. Like if you want to inscribe or etch, let's say if you want to etch a rune right now, it costs like $100 or $75. It's not that expensive to etch your own token. So there's some of these bullish elements that we could all build, but this also becomes the bearish element, is that the volume has essentially all been sucked up during the halving. And most people have retraced, right? Most people have withdrawn a lot of their potential capital or left their capital that they were looking to reallocate into runes on the sidelines here. The good thing is there is still a little bit of volume on runes, and we'll talk about that here shortly. But let's kind of go back and just look through the data here as well. So as we kind of go a little bit further, what I want to show you is just let's look at runes transactions happening on a daily basis since halving. As you can see, this is really bearish. All we see is the start here on April 20th. Of course, it is going to be at a high peak, but the numbers have massively dwindled. Of course, on day one of halving, we're looking at roughly, let's say, 17,000 total transactions in regard to runes on day one. Right now, if we look to, let's say, May 1st, let's go back, we're looking at 1,000. Right? This is a drop off of over 95%. And this kind of, again, becomes the larger challenge here, is that everything is falling off. We've seen a few blips, and a few of these blips we kind of know really well. We saw these etching blips, right? We saw tons of etchings kind of come in over a few days. This was primarily driven by punks. If you remember, rune punks kind of happening over the weekend. That was kind of one of the things we saw. But generally, again, everything is dwindling. Everything is going down in regard to full runes transactions in this market. And again, if we keep going further down, what do we start recognizing here as well is that pretty much all of the activities that we'd want to see are going down. We see fees going down. We're seeing transactions going down. We're seeing transfers going down. We're seeing etches going down. We're seeing new mints going down. Pretty much, it feels like this meta is bored, right? The market is bored with what is being presented. And it's not a fee problem anymore, right? That's kind of the other interesting thing, right? This has nothing to do with fees, right? This only has to do with the fact that the market has lost confidence in where this can potentially scale and whether or not profitable opportunities still present. The world of the Bitcoin casino or the ordinal casino is generally bearish. And almost all of these metrics I'm showing you here, of course, on runes, are probably very similar graphs that you're going to see when we look to ordinal assets as well. in this market, right? And I think that's kind of another important thing to understand, right? To kind of recognize this. Sorry, I think Quota asked, what is an edict? An edict is the ability to buy or sell the tokens, right? It's essentially the edict is like the rune ID, the amount, and the output index. So that's when a buy or sell transaction is happening on the secondary market. That effectively would be considered an edict transaction. If we look through these really quickly, right? Transfer, very simple. You're transferring your runes from one wallet to another. Mints, right, of course, is us minting a rune directly through a platform like Luminex, that it might be an open mint. Etching is the ability to create a new rune type, right, or rune category, right? So it's etching a new rune category. And then edicts are the actual buy-sell transactions in the market here as well, hence why they dominate most of the volume of transactions here. So as you can see, a lot of these metrics are looking bearish on this front, right? And we can see kind of just some of the the lack of interest in this market, right? And kind of where these people are going. We could also see kind of what are some of the rune whales out here. There's this kind of interesting to look at, just seeing like what their portfolios are projecting. I'd actually recommend you to run in and just grab a couple of these wallets and just see where they're being positioned, right? How many transactions are they doing? How much assets do they hold? What are their actual plays? And you can see this goes pretty crazy. He starts noting all the top runes here, which is pretty fascinating, right? You can see kind of just like what is taking grasp pretty much after the first like 5-6 days, right? We've seen that when we're looking at new mints, it's pretty much only uncommon goods that is actually running as new mints since the last week. And that's even at a very low volume because, again, just showcasing the market has almost no conviction on new mints. And this kind of continues to be a larger element when we look to runes overall. They just clearly keep falling short. They keep falling short of the market's expectations. And this means that we're going to remain in a lull until a meaningful new catalyst is introduced. What is that catalyst? Unknown. It could be many different things, right? It could be a new rune collection somehow capturing more of the meta. The likelihood of that probably low. Might be a new ordinals collection that might get a little bit of hype that then brings runes attached. That might be more realistic. Or probably what is the most realistic? Probably new protocols or new changes from a governmental structure or new introduction of certain funds and deployment of capital as well. We're kind of in this little kind of rut because the likelihood of a new catalyst coming is pretty low. And this is kind of the other challenge that you're going to run into, as well, as that as bullish as I am on Binance, it's not that I'm bullish that it saves the market. I think Binance only saves like the top 5 to 9 tokens, right? Which is very interesting when you look at this market here as well, is that you're realizing is that, even though Binance is probably going to be around the corner, it's definitely not something that you should expect saves the market collectively. It saves just a few winners. And why would I believe that, or why would I have basis for that? It's very similar to the ETH market. The ETH market's pretty much dead as well. And even though Binance is there, Binance is not saving the entirety of the market. Binance is saving those that may be getting those listings. And even when we say that, it's not crazy bullish. You could go look at the floor prices of Incarna, look at the floor prices of Persona, look at the floor prices of a handful of these ETH-based projects that are actually having Binance, they're either Binance Lab funded or very heavily hard hinting that they have Binance. Even their floors aren't holding up. And that's kind of where you recognize this market is moving towards a collective bearish sentiment when it comes to ordinal-based assets or NFT-based assets and token-based assets, if it isn't just pure meme coin. We're in that form of degeneracy that the only thing that really works is super cheap, super speculative lotto tickets in the form of meme coins. And to be very transparent, Bitcoin is not for that. Bitcoin's cost structure doesn't make sense. Bitcoin time structure doesn't make sense. Bitcoin's overall, lack of user experience due to a lot of these issues as we're discussing, like, these large timestamps, et cetera, that are coming in, you can quickly realize that Bitcoin has a lot to solve. And I want to be very open about this because I think this market is trying to overstate when it gets saved. I still have all my position in runes. I actually haven't sold out of any of my core rune positions. I sold out of all of the ordinal assets, meaning that I've sold the rune stones and I've sold the Prometheans post snapshot, right? I tried to move generally fast as I expected those didn't hold residual value. But I'm still holding out through what I think a Bitcoin future will be when Binance does enter. But again, I'm only holding out on these ones because sub 10 runes. I don't believe Binance saves the overall market. And this is where you want to start thinking through your own conviction and ideals and thesis, because the good thing is that I'm not feeling like I'm running into opportunity cost problems. What do I mean by that? I don't really know where else I would allocate right now. How bullish are you on anything? Maybe blast farming, maybe some degeneracy on base, maybe a little bit more degeneracy on soul. Like, realistically, those are never going to be a huge core part of my portfolio at this point in regard to at least the way how I interact with the market. So for me, I still feel that the value is best in holding runes sub 10 until a potential Binance listing. That's still the thesis I'm operating under. We'll see. We'll see if it even works out. Because again, although I'm pretty happy how RSIC has moved, and Dog has recovered a little bit, they are both well under my expectations, right? I was hoping both of these. Well, I was hoping RSIC. RSIC's actually kind of outperformed. I was hoping RSIC would be able to get to around 500 million. It's not that far. It probably seems a lot closer, to be realistic. While, again, I was hoping for Dog to be well over a billion. I don't know if that's the case anymore. I don't know if a billion is going to be realized by by May 20th. And I think that's an important thing to be able to say out loud, because this is then what kind of positions on the larger opportunity that exists. And that is understanding the protocols that need to come, right? So what is the biggest takeaway that you should see over the last few weeks? Honestly, it's really simple. It's the fact that, holy shit, this market has the worst infrastructure and tools right now on Bitcoin, yet millions, if not billions of dollars came into this market and they were ready to put in. Just the protocols weren't ready to reciprocate. The infrastructure wasn't ready to reciprocate that value. And because of that, it led to a very lackluster experience, which means that it's left a sour taste in a lot of users. It means that the likelihood of re-engaging these users is still going to be a little bit of a battle. But here's the bullish thing. All these users created wallets. All these users had to understand some of the basic fundamentals of what runes are and what ordinals are to be able to participate. It is still net bullish in regard to how much new wallets and new users that can now easily transfer their capital over to Bitcoin when that opportunity presents itself. And that's another reason to still stay bullish overall. It's not that this is money that won't ever come back to ordinals again. The truth is, we just need to give them a reason to bring it back to ordinals here as well. And they usually have the wallets already set up, and they should realistically do all of these things here to kind of give you the larger upside. And maybe, hopefully, right, what I think is going to be very clear is that when you see more of these incentives from, say, Magic Eden with diamonds here at the moment right now, as they utilize their layer to bring over Bitcoin users, you're going to get more lock-in. And this still remains the bullish element, is that users will maintain a speculative toe and have their wallet infrastructure and ability to operate already known. So it means that the next activation window should be very bullish. But the question begs is when? When will that next activation window be? And I'm not sure if it happens in the next 30 days. I'm not as confident as I was when I was looking at some of the initial metrics around BRC, some of the initial metrics around runes, and of course the initial metrics on ordinals. But right now, what you're generally seeing is that you're probably not allocating capital. This is the perfect scenario to be allocating time. right? And this is where the farming opportunity becomes significantly bigger, right? And that's kind of where you could start thinking through a lot more of a bullish mindset because you're betting on an infrastructure that a lot of people just wrote off, right? A lot of the ETH users are clamoring in their ETH chat rooms and their ETH NFT projects of, wow, I can't believe how disappointing that was. Like Bitcoin is not the thing, or Runes is not the thing, or Ordinals is not the thing. And that's kind of a good thing, recognize because that a lot, a lot more opportunities that people are going to continue to overlook. And this means this is the time to kind of dive in. But before we dive into that, I want to talk to you about how do we size this so you could actually have a little bit more conviction on how big we think this market's going to be. And the best way for us to size this, well, I want to be very honest and transparent up front, is that no one knows how big this will actually get, right? Any numbers that are presented here are comparables, extrapolation, and let's say back of the napkin math that should serve more as an exercise in the form of a framework than a true understanding of the actual math. And we could dive deeper into what the actual math is as well in future conversation. But the broad strokes, I think, is what matters more. And I want to talk a little bit about that to kind of set this. And I'm so bullish on this. I want to let you know that I am making farming pretty much one of my largest tasks on a daily and a weekly basis. I'm now, if you want to know the total amount of wallets I'm now up to on just MotoSwap, I'm now up to 68 wallets that have cleared 100 points. And it's not because I believe MotoSwap is the sole winner. It's not. I don't really believe that. The reason why I'm at that number is that I want to. Anyone can do this. Anyone can run with this. Anyone can make time with this if you commit to the process, right? And if you commit to the process, it could get really bullish really quickly. And what do I mean by that? Well, what I mean by that is that all the time you're making on this one protocol, it's actually increasing your chances on all the other future protocols because you're building history, you're building engagement, and you're building value. But here's the other reason why I'm so bullish is when I look at the basic math, right? When I look at the basic math, it is kind of insane, right? And let's talk about the basic math here, and then we'll start going into some of these protocol opportunities. So, what's the best way to understand the comparable here? Well, the honest truth is that we have to compare Ethereum to Bitcoin, right? This is the best comp we have, and this is a pretty good from VanEck.com. Gives you a really good understanding of how they predict the current value of L2s to potentially be on just Ethereum. And I want you to understand is that a lot of people hold the thesis that Bitcoin's L2 will be just as large, if not larger, than Ethereum L2s. That is still something that can be debated. That is still something that you should question. But you should ask yourself, what if BTC's ecosystem, L2 ecosystem, can become as large as Ethereum? And why would I have maybe a reason to believe this? Well, one is, holy shit, we need smart contracts, right? Like if we're recognizing a need for L2s, Bitcoin's L2s are probably significantly more needed than a lot of the Ethereum L2s when we look at the differences and deltas between what can happen with mainnet versus L2s, right? And a clearly smart contracts are going to be needed if you want to believe in a future DeFi, right? A DeFi future here alongside Bitcoin. But the other reason why this gets really interesting here as well is that we have 4 years of history on how Ethereum played through. And you can actually go through this full report by VanEck, and it shows you kind of all the understandings of all the different L2s. They give a little bit of understanding of how to measure them. It's actually a really great overview on understanding L2s on Ethereum. But what's even more bullish, they give you an understanding of their business models. They show you what their kind of revenue structures can look like, what they're already generating today. They also talk about how they could potentially grow in value over time. But there's a lot of stuff here. We don't have to go deeply into this. What we really want to go to is just the last section. It's layer two's valuation prediction by 2030. And this is important to understand. because current estimates have Ethereum's L2 ecosystem worth roughly around L2 and protocol system worth around $400 billion today. Some would say that number is closer to 250 to 300. There's a lot of different estimates here. Let's use the smallest number in that range, just for the sake of conversation. We're looking at 250 billion. What we're also looking at is not only do we have that in the current number here, while Bitcoin's current L2 is worth less than 20 billion, there's probably a clear 10x just there. But here's where it gets really bullish. They actually estimate based off expected returns, net margins, transactions, and value propositions of these L2s. And what they estimate is that by 2030, right, we're looking realistically 5 years away, the Ethereum L2 ecosystem will be worth $1 trillion. That's what they currently believe. And what you can see is that, okay, well, that's really huge. Let's say it's 250 billion right now. It's at least another 4x is what they're believing in the next few years. And you could go through their market, you can see what they're believing and what the assumptions that they're using, right? So the assumptions they're using is that 90% of transaction value will happen on L2, ecosystem TVL will happen on L2, and they also talk a little bit about the MEV capture. It's actually really interesting how deep they go into all of these infrastructures here. But the real numbers to understand, they expect Ethereum's ecosystem to be worth $1 trillion by 2030. So let's assume, and again, this is back in the napkin math, right? The question we should ask ourselves, why wouldn't Bitcoin get as large? Bitcoin needs the same infrastructure. Bitcoin's trying to be DeFi oriented with all of its infrastructure as well, right? There's already a lot of people thinking through L2s. Why wouldn't this hit that same number? I think it's a fair assumption to assume that it could hit a similar valuation as the market cap, considering that Bitcoin is also 3x, 4x larger than the overall market cap, right, of Ethereum here. It would be fair to say that we should probably have very similar infrastructure. There could be people who challenge that assumption, and there's a debate there, but I think generally it's a well-accepted truth that we should see a lot of this infrastructure come. So let's assume that we also believe Bitcoin's infrastructure will be worth $1 trillion by 2030. What you can realize is this is the alpha, right? Is that Ethereum worth, say, 250 billion, you could get to $1 trillion, let's say, by 2030. There's only a 4x opportunity there. Doesn't get me wrong, that still means there's like hundreds of billions of dollars of airdrops still coming to Ethereum, which is why we don't fade it completely. We look at L2s, and we'll talk about that, like Blast and a few other ones along the way. But this is what the real alpha is. Bitcoin infrastructure worth 20 billion today, 25 billion, 50 billion. You can do whatever number you want there, and you believe it gets to $1 trillion, right? You believe it could get to that. We're looking at a 200x, right? If not larger in that time window. And that's where it gets really bullish, right? And maybe you don't believe the trillion number. Maybe you were asking, okay, like what's the real number we can get? Can you give it to me? Well, don't believe me. Let's look through another tier one investor and see what they're thinking. One of them is pretty much going to be Pantera. But before we do that, one of these great articles here is that what a lot of people do believe is that the future of Bitcoin layer 2s is going to drive this, a current bull cycle, but potentially future bull cycle. And there's a lot of people trying to put real large estimates here. And they recognize that, dude, without a doubt, Bitcoin will take a large portion of the DeFi market. That's what a lot of people inherently believe. Again, it's an assumption that we could challenge, but let's assume this could be the case. What they really do believe is that if this works, this emerging sector could have $500 billion valuation. And this is directly from Pantera Capital, which is considered by many a tier one VC. And I'll show you this link here as well. This is worth reading. What you're seeing here is that Bitcoin is in that what they call a breakthrough moment, right? That is going to unlock the DeFi sector, which is an untapped $500 billion opportunity, right? And when you see this in Pantera, right, this is a true venture firm that has reason to be allocating capital. They currently have over, I think it was like $4 billion. Yeah, $4 billion under management, assets under management. And they believe that effectively you're going to see the DeFi applications are going to go from, roughly like, looks like it's maybe worth 70 billion, looks like the number here they're using at the moment, right? Jump to this. And they believe it's going to jump to 500 billion, right? This is super bullish for us to be able to see, because what we're recognizing here is that venture firms are putting huge amounts of capital behind this thesis as well. It's one thing for a douchebag influencer to say this stuff. It's another when you're actually hearing it from a large allocator of capital primarily focused on the Bitcoin ecosystem. And this is kind of where you see the bullishness, is that as we as users interacted on Bitcoin, many of us could argue it was a less than ideal experience, right? There were probably times you were front ran. There were probably times where the user experience didn't make sense. And to be very honest, you kind of wish smart contracts existed. If smart contracts existed, you could do better collection offers, right? On a per trait basis, right? We can't even do that basic stuff for marketplace efficiency yet. So there's a lot of belief that we should be going off L1s and moving down to L2s. And this is kind of the other beauty here, is that VCs see this pattern that emerged on Ethereum, right? This is their comparable, right? They now see the value in the market cap of Bitcoin, right? It's one thing to say all these numbers, right? Where, this is a brand new, let's say layer one, if we were arguing that Bitcoin's a brand new layer one, and they don't have a real large market cap, right? But we always forget, right? I mean, I always forget. But we do forget, this is a 1.1 trillion at the moment right now, even after the dump. This is $1 trillion asset class. It's a mind-boggling number to remember, right, on that $1 trillion asset. So what does this now mean? Well, what it means is that this market's actually going to take a little bit slower to develop, which means that a lot of people are going to stay on the outside, or when they do interact, they're only going to touch kind of the surface area stuff. The short term becomes on ordinals and runes, the more bullish the long term becomes on farming protocols. Because all of these protocols are going to need users. They're all going to compete with the same capital. They're all going to compete with the same strategy in doing airdrops of tokens. And the best part is that many of them are utilizing testnet as well. And this is where we start realizing, holy shit, farming might be the biggest play period in Bitcoin right now as these protocols come up. And here's the other beauty about why I also believe it's so bullish, and we've talked about this, is that there's almost no wallet history. What you should be doing right now is developing mainnet wallets and testnet wallets that are unique, separated, have no connection with one another, and you're just dropping new assets. Like if you're ready to buy a new asset, don't buy it in your main, right? Send that money through a centralized exchange to a new wallet and season up that wallet. I mean, to be very honest, if you just did that simple strategy, you would have got a lot more diamonds, right, for Magic Eden, right, in regard to that claim on just Bitcoin alone. It's crazy. I'm going through all my old Bitcoin wallets, and I don't know if it's really going to be worth 10 cents a Magic Eden diamond. That's what some people are saying on the over-the-counter. I don't believe that's going to actually be the case. I don't even know what the total amount of supply is. I should actually be curious to see what that is. But you could put a comp to that. But yeah, just because of that, I'm just getting the ability to claim multiple versions of these diamonds by doing very little. There's going to be the exact same game with a lot of these protocols. And I started looking at these numbers here. When you look at these numbers, you start realizing that there's probably less than 50,000 wallets legitimately engaging at tier one protocol games. And what I mean by tier one protocol games, it means that it's more than just like do 6 actions. Like you actually have to do a few more grind actions, or like, actual real user actions. Because a few of these numbers are super pumped, right? Like, like all the BNB kind of numbers you see, and the pre-sale kind of crap that you see for Incarna and stuff like that. Like those are all fake numbers. Those aren't real users, right? Like everyone, they're just pumping those numbers up right? Relatively with a handful of wallets where there's almost no authentication required. They're just getting the little value to literally split up their funds and put it across hundreds, if not thousands of wallets. Those aren't real numbers, right? When we look at real numbers of users who are actually engaging in protocols and would be actually gaining, we're looking at probably only 50,000 wallets that are actually doing this correctly. And then of those 50,000 wallets, I bet you that it's realistically less than 10,000 humans doing this, right? I really believe it's less than 10,000 humans that are going to be fighting for farming protocols for the next 3 to 6 months. I think so many people are going to be late to this because it's not easy. It's not easy to understand the UTXOs, understanding all the different user experiences, getting ready for testnet to go down. I mean, you can't even get testnet BTC that easily unless you're willing to pay for it. I mean, there's all these challenges here. And this is kind of what makes it clear on what Ronin is trying to achieve for each and every one of us is get the largest piece of that land. And that's kind of the opportunity you all have in front of you is that Bitcoin land, imagine it, right? Imagine it that the Bitcoin land is this massive, empty, huge, rich nutrient land. It's like you just came across either like there's two amazing regions in the world. It's the Mesopotamia region and the California region. It's like really special with where the land is. Assume you found one of these regions and it's just endless land that no one has claimed. That's your opportunity right now, right? Is to claim that land and more importantly, choose the crop that you know will be most valuable and give you the best yield over time. Just the land itself is valuable, but the yield that you will get from these protocols will become immense relatively quickly. And this is kind of the game you now need to play is that when the market becomes bear, right? The best time to farm is now. The market's totally become bear, and now putting activity in on chain and highlighting your wallet is a very strong way to start maturing your wallets for this. And that's the other thing of why this is important, right? I wouldn't be talking about farming if we're all limited just to one play each, right? The real reason we talk about farming is that we're all guaranteed at least 2 to 3 multiples on this because you should all be using 2 to 3 multi wallets at a bare minimum, right? That is what you should be doing. And that multiplying effect is one of the easiest arbitrage or edges you have in this market. And the best part is most of these guys don't care. They legitimately don't care. They just care that you're on there pushing their numbers and you at least are giving them enough reason to you're a real person. Because again, when we remember the Cypherpunk Manifesto, right, the early language around here, it was around privacy. And I think you're going to see more BTC oriented individuals that are going to be able to enforce and protect your privacy even more. And this makes it even more bullish as you build these different wallets and personas to be able to capture these airdrops. So when we look at this market, you can start looking at some basic napkin math, right? You have 500 billion from Pantera. You have, the report saying a trillion for, Ethereum's L2 ecosystem by 2030. These numbers look insanely huge. And there are very few people who are able to be a part of this and capturing this in the early days. And this is where you want this opportunity to remain big because here's the truth as well around runes. The best thing to do about runes right now is to etch runes, right? Is just etch runes and hold them because that's what the whole market's waiting for is get these lower runes, hold them, and find the opportunity of when this will come back. You might see some short-term runs, but again, my honest recommendation here is that the only thing you are buying are stuff that you want to hold for 30 to 90 days at a minimum, right? I'm still not touching many ordinals. It's not that I don't believe ordinals can have another play up. I just don't feel it's an asset class that I have confidence in these market conditions. What I'm actually doing is I'm rotating my ordinals and selling them for liquidity and then using that liquidity to fund new mainnet wallets. That's what I want. And then I buy with those wallets again, right? I'm either buying small runes. Like I've been telling you, my strategy is just I'm putting Fehu in lots of room in lots of these projects, lots of these mainnet wallets, mainly because I have the simple assumption if I put a sub 10 rune in there, there's no way they think, right? No way they think that's going to be a farming wallet, right? That's what the hope is. I could be totally wrong on that if Fehu decides to rug us, but at least Fehu seems to be moving in a decent amount of time. But I'm thinking for 3 months ahead. I'm thinking for 6 months ahead. I'm trying to understand what can I do that I can't do now, right? Like that's kind of the important thing, right? What were the things you wish you could have done now? You probably wish you did create 20 different wallets and you would have got magic even diamonds, right? You probably wish you were etching runes sub 1000, right? Once you saw what the cost ended up becoming, right? You probably would have dumped a lot of your pre runes pretty early, considering that only the top 10 have even held some value. It's not even the top 10, it's really like 3 or 4 of the top. What you're actually seeing overall is that the market is massively, massively, massively broken on this front. And that means that opportunity comes for farmers. This is exactly where the farmer persona should be realized and developed. And again, farmers, like even not even the right way of representing it. I really do believe it is as a pioneer-like role. You are the first to try new technology and tools and become power users of that tech. And some of these will be small little veins of gold that you're, some will become the largest vein that you'll ever see, and it will create, really meaningful and monumental size of wealth. And if you've been playing this game even the last year, you already know how that feels. The last couple of years, the Starknet airdrop was pretty juicy earlier, right? The Wormhole airdrop was really juicy earlier as well. There's already these airdrops, so you already see the pattern. The best thing that you can do now is, can you trick your mind to start caring about future version of you in 6 months? If you can care about the future crypto version of you in 6 months, farming on BTC is the smartest thing you can do. The second smartest thing you can do is probably farming on Blur. The third best thing you can do is probably farm on a new develops and picks up high. Those clearly are the better and more logical plays. And here's the best part is while you do all this stuff for, you put 30%, 50%, 80% of your time, whatever it may be, how much you want to put into farming, you will always have time to make degen plays. This doesn't isolate you from not being able to make rune plays or ordinal plays. You can do those all at the same time. It's just you're not solely focused on that. Why does ordinals feel like a really shit experience for most? It's because they only came in to play ordinal, and that's kind of the fucking worst game to be playing right now. So the market looks really boring. It doesn't look fun for most people to engage. But for me, it's weird. I've been weirdly kind of happy about this market because it continues to commit to my mindset that clearly farming is the only alpha on Bitcoin. It really is the only alpha on Bitcoin. It's the only thing that will remain true, remain of value, and remain consistent. And I think that gets really bullish when we look to the long-term market here as well. So that's kind of where you guys want to start positioning yourself and start understanding where this market goes. And moreover, why you might want to start considering, right, even more so that fall. And the other reason you want to understand this is that this will be the primary growth strategy for all companies in the future. Everyone, every emerging L2 will do this. So you're not only just betting on Bitcoin, you're then betting on you're going to be the first to one of these L2s, right? And we talked about it. What were the biggest airdrops? Arbitrum, Starknet, Optimism was okay. IMX was pretty good, right? These are all like versions of L2s or side chains, etc., that exist on the Ethereum ecosystem, right? And they're all valuable, right? AVAX and a few others you could throw into that list. Here's kind of the bullish thing is that those are all about to come to Bitcoin in the next 6 to 12 months. They all will. So not only are you going to be early on all these protocols, early on ecosystems, right? And remember, if you were here in the early days, big Aptos got for the first couple of weeks. Again, it was only for the first couple of weeks, but it was really, really, really good volume and really good action, right? It might have been you had been then early there for base. You might have been early there for blast, right? All of these opportunities still remain for you. And I think that's kind of the most important thing to recognize is that those will then create their own branch of opportunities below, right? As you get early to these protocols, you'll make early plays on these protocols. If you remember, like, what was it? Kingdom, DeFi Kingdom. If you remember some of these crazy L2 games, I mean, Krabata on AVAX. Do you remember those really bad, really simple cloned games that went to a lot of these L2s? That whole meta is going to come to Bitcoin when these L2s emerge too, and you have an advantage there. You have a lead. You've seen how this market plays out. The only thing you now need to complement it with is a wallet or multiple wallets that are also farming that opportunity. If you can do those layers, this is kind of where you can get bullish and, more importantly, position for the long-term win. I think outside of that, everything is too risk oriented. And that's how you almost want to build your management internally. When you see like a high risk, low developing or slow developing ecosystem, this is absolutely the time that farming should be higher on your list, right? So for me right now, farming would be like 80% of my personal time. 15% is just making sure my runes don't go to shit. And 5% is just making sure my ordinals don't go to shit, but they've already gone to shit, right? Like that's kind of what the time is right now. When ordinals and or runes pick up, right, you could change your timing where then farming becomes 40% or 50%. But this is the framework you want to be able to get into. And this is the number one advice I is commit 2 to 3 hour session for straight farming every week. That is the number one advice I can give to each and every one of you, because without that, you won't commit to a longer stretch, right? You can't just piece this together by doing 15 minutes here and there. If you truly want to be that pioneer or potentially that baron, you really actually need to be engaging with these protocols and making sure that you're giving yourself that 2 3 hour stretch to truly do this long-term farming. And once you do that, then you can add more 2 hour stretches into your routine. And that's exactly how it's worked out for me thus far. I'm essentially doing 90-minute to 2 hour stretches around 8 times a week at the moment right now. So that gives me around 15 hours to 20 hours a week of potential farming time. A lot of it is done on the weekends, right? It's just easier for me for my schedule as well. And that's the other beauty about farming. None of these have to be off of anyone else's schedule. Maybe the only schedule and calendar you have to care about is when testnet goes down, right? But outside of that, you actually have full control of when you want to engage and interact with this. But you do need to set that process up. And the framework you want to understand is exactly what we discussed here as we kind of look to our summary. Ethereum's L2s are going to be worth $1 trillion by 2030. Bitcoin's L2s, by considering one of the tier one investors in this market, will be a 500 billion opportunity relatively soon. They don't give us a hard date on what that estimate would be, right? We understand that Bitcoin is the largest market cap, still holding a $1.1 trillion market cap for its asset. When you look at these three variables, there's only one clear factor. People need to build better tools to make Bitcoin a lot easier for us to unlock their DeFi value. Bitcoin has a larger store of value, which means that it will attract VCs and tier one builders to continue to operate in this market. We want to understand that ordinals and runes are just short-term casinos that are here to prop up the bigger game, a BTC DeFi future. Simply put, a BTC DeFi future is a certain. The question will be is that how big will it become, right? And this is where you get to now make that connection bet. Right now, I do not believe there's an ecosystem worth betting on that is bigger or better than Bitcoin. Bitcoin is without a doubt my number one slot. Blast Blur would be my number 2 slot if I started about 2 months ago. It's still worthy of doing stuff there, but it is late to the game on a lot of fronts. And you kind of need to, I don't need to say you have to be a whale, but you probably need 3 to 4 ETH to really make a dent into Blast and Blur. And we'll actually talk about that next week. 95% of the content here will be built for Bitcoin, but 5% is going to go to new chains to give you guys a few understanding of those opportunities as well. Because here's the truth. If you build this farming habit, you could do it on any chain. And that's the other realist alpha I can give you. If you understand how this will be a primary growth strategy for every emerging consumer and or technical protocol on the blockchain, you'll realize being a farmer becomes one of the most critical skill sets you can have. Because what it means is you're an early user, you can spot trends, and you get allocation without risking huge amounts of capital. That's exactly the trade-off you want to be when you're a power user in this market. And it's not the sexiest thing, but it's the smartest thing to do. And it's the smartest thing to do when the market is bear, right? Like I said, what are you really doing? Mints aren't even minting out on either chain, on ETH or BTC right now, right? Almost everything is nearing all-time lows at this point. Most your holder bases are underwater at this point. It's pretty brutal across the way. So of course, there will be outliers, and I want to be very clear. Someone will figure out an play that will lead to some value. Someone will figure out a rune pay that will lead to value. But the truth is that we're limited. And this is also the other last alpha I'll share. The reason why I'm so bullish is because of Casey. Casey's actually so simplistic in his design, right? And he intentionally is a simple designer and is very world class at it. I mean this with a lot of respect. He really truly knows how to build simplistic protocols that are native to blockchain. But that's the only way Casey is designed. He's never really optimized for L2 visions. He's always wanted everything to be on L1 and mainnet and making it as effective as possible. So when new builders actually enter into this market, I think they're going to take an alternative thesis, a future where smart contracts and L2s should exist. And this will be kind of a little bit of a fight with laser eye maxis. And this is where I also want to be very clear. It may be a little bit slower or maybe a little bit bumpier of a ride as we kind of go into this. But what is clear is that Casey has showed the light of what happens when you could build just within Bitcoin's framework. And the current native Bitcoin framework sucks for everything else we want to do. It does. We just felt it, right? As great as this simplistic, cheaper UTXO framework is this better of an order of magnitude experience than BRC20? No, it's just, it might be an order of magnitude cheaper than BRC20, but most users don't care. They want degen wealth. They want way more cool stuff to be built. And the truth is, runes kind of can't go anywhere from a pure technical perspective, right? Most of the meta on runes trying to work around Luminex or creating new inscription protocols, right, that will allow for people to do open mints like on Rune Punks. That's how simplistic this is. We're actually ran out of ideas. And same thing with ordinals. There's not a lot you can do with ordinals. Casey specifically says, and kudos to him, anyone who promises utility on ordinals or runes is lying to you, right? Because all of this is purely just meme-based protocols. That's what he's created, simplistic meme-based protocol. And that's what we got. And unfortunately, this is not the ecosystem for meme-based protocols due to the cost, ineffectiveness of blocks. He's missing all of those elements of what I think leads to a meme protocol. So this wasn't supposed to be the meme play. That's kind of the misnomer. We tricked ourselves because we thought that was easy casino money. And of course, this is easier to say with hindsight. I definitely still believe there will be large meme coins, but it won't happen with its current infrastructure as is. And this then makes me more bullish then, right? Is look how simplistic and look how capped we are with the current constraints of Bitcoin. How do we not bring smart contracts here? How do we not bring more intelligent design? And again, like I said, laser eye maxis will kind of hate some of this stuff because it requires some type of off-chain computation. The question will beg is how will people structure that off-chain computation in some way, right? Even Lightning Network has off-chain computation in some way, right? There are trusted ways to still do certain off-chain elements. So the question is what's that balance? What's that risk of introducing a centralized structure to a decentralized protocol? And this is always the debate, right? And the question that really begs is, how much of us as traders and collectors care about that? It's a very interesting question, right? Because if we actually think about this, we didn't give a fuck about it on Ethereum, right? We didn't care that 99% assets are inscribed or right are noted on some type of Amazon web server at this point, where it could be deleted at any moment if you don't pay the upkeep or whatever it may be, right? We literally have off-chain images, and we just made it harder to trade it with on-chain ownership, right? What was the best thing Ethereum gave us was a marketplace to trade these fake on-chain assets, because they weren't on-chain. They're all off-chain assets, but with on-chain trading protocols unlocked. So this is kind of where you could look back and step back, and you can start realizing, holy fuck, Bitcoin needs so much maturity, so much more evolution of tech, and there's so many smart people building. And if you want to get even more bullish, exactly about what OP, you should understand, especially what Cat VM is doing from the Quantum Cats team. We talked about this earlier this week. This isn't something that I'm asking you to wait dozens of months on, right? There are going to be meaningful L2 protocols and swap protocols and meta protocols and lending protocols coming in the market in the next 90 days, right? Which means that they'll have farming opportunities in the next 90 days. And that's kind of where it gets really bullish. Is this is 100% coming. Right, these are builders who are not going to retrace from that. They've already started investing. They believe in a Bitcoin future, and they believe in the form of like utilizing protocol incentives via, say, runes, or maybe they don't even use runes. And that's another important thing to realize. Runes are a really shitty protocol for anyone who's trying to build utility on top of them. Casey himself would know. So a lot of you guys won't use runes, and this is kind of the other reason exposure to MotiveSwap. It's not because I believe MotiveSwap is going to be the winner by any means. Is that MotiveSwap gives us kills two birds with one stone effectively. On our, what we're going to show you next week is we're going to give you a farmer bingo card. It's kind of what we're creating with a partner here. We're working with we'll introduce this a little bit later, but we are working. Been one of the best farmers that I've come across over the last few years. They've made seven figures, all provable on chain. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to build you guys all what we call is like a bingo card of what you want to hit. Like you want to hit 5 L2 protocols. You probably want to hit a couple swap protocols. You want to hit a couple lending protocols. You want to hit a couple staking protocols. You want to hit a couple of bridge protocols, right? What you want to do is you want to get a nice mixture, because what you're really trying to do is you're almost trying to reestablish what the Ethereum infrastructure has built for L2s over the last 4 years. You can see which were the biggest ones. You'll probably need an identity protocol, right? This is kind of important here as well. You're going to get those layers coming in too, which is really bullish, because we also saw someone like Saylor, right, note here, right, that he is going to be building out his own decentralized identification protocol. We will need that. We'll need social protocols, right? You're going to see some awful versions, right, of all the social networks we saw on ETH come here as well too. So yeah, starting next week, you'll have Zulu and Back. So the way that this Discord will work is that we'll only do live sessions on Tuesday, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. Tuesdays and Thursdays will be farming sessions and protocol review sessions. Wednesday is Ronin sessions and market review sessions, where we talk about ordinals and we talk about ordinals and rune-based assets as well. We were going to start this week. We just pushed to next week, because what we're also creating is a little bit of a offline element for you to understand this when you don't join the live chats. The live chats will be recorded, so you'll be able to hit all these protocols as you see fit. But what we also see is these scrolls will now open up for each new protocol, so that you have all your questions. We're also trying to work and see how we could utilize the right power of AI into these tools as well. That's kind of the next thing we're looking at. And we're in conversation with a couple partners on how to deploy that for you guys. And again, that's the cool thing. All this stuff will be no cost, no extraction, no price to you guys. And that's kind of how this network will kind of scale up. The other thing that you'll see as well is that the community is now kind of gone slightly private, and I'll talk to you about that here as well. No one can really enter in externally anymore. They can just gain the Saito role, but they can't gain the Ashigaru role, which is the ability to join chat and a few other areas. The way this is also going to work is that you guys each will start receiving the ability as you guys stack sats and earn the Ronin roles. And a lot of you have already earned them here as well for the next waves and a few others. You will then be able to invite other people as well, right? So the exclusive invites will come from you guys to be able to share as you unlock more and more value. There'll be a few partners here that will be coming in as well, and a few partner communities too. But the goal is cool. We will keep an active community and we will purge actively as well. The goal here for Ronin is a network hub. You are either learning how to acquire sats diligently, right? Or you're helping others acquire sats. That's how you get the road and roll, right? Is either accumulate sats yourself in a meaningful way with the knowledge acquired here, right? Or help others stack sats. It's really simple. There's no other game here. There's no other requirements here. There's no other play here. It's help those and build a community that values it. And that's also really important because Bitcoin communities are very different right now. Bitcoin communities aren't really that active in Discord. It's quite the opposite. You might see a little bit of chat here and there, but majority of these, right? Excuse me, majority of these discords are actually pretty inactive. So our goal is trying to shift that. Our goal is that we've actually see amazing community, amazing shared alpha here, which is great, right? You all are able to kind of help, contribute, and share with one another. And we want to continue that in that philosophy and in that thinking. And in doing so, you'll be able to acquire more Ronins. You'll be able to acquire more assets. You'll be able to acquire also more partnership assets as well. And we'll talk about that here in the upcoming weeks. The great thing is Ronin is also helping other artists get ready to launch live. So we want to help them launch their projects too. And you're also going to see some knowledge for builders as well come in here. And our goal is just, again, helping people navigate. I think a lot of, especially ETH communities, struggle to come into BTC correctly. So our goal is trying to give as much of that insight here too. So hopefully through that, you're going to be able to see a lot of details, a lot of value kind of unlocking. And those are kind of the next steps here as the market kind of continues to expand. So with that, guys, we're going to let you go. You'll see another event here later today in the week. Join in. And if you can, hopefully there'll be enough live information here for you to continue to stack and be prepared for these wallets. The biggest thing here is realize, commit to a farmer mindset, commit to those 2 hours, and we'll keep doing these sessions. And a lot of you have already been doing it, and we're giving you rewards. Some of the top earners from each of our earlier communities, and each of our for each of the projects and protocols we interact with, we'll also be giving a few prizes, and those will be coming out here as well. And again, just rewards. Reward one another, reward each other with your insights, reward each other with your opportunities, whether it be ordinal-based assets, rune-based assets, or protocol-based assets. Lots of cool things here as well, which is great. Shout out Soldier. He's showing his own tracking spreadsheet that he's using here as well. Try to maintain and manage it. Really appreciate that. Always great. Again, what you guys want to know is that you'll have a lot of these tools coming in, which will make it really fun. You really want to make sure you're going to see more tools and more spreadsheets coming out here as well for you guys, and even more templates and processes so that you could engage as well. So lots of cool things coming. We'll hopefully be sharing that here with you guys soon. With that all, we'll let you all go. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll chat soon. Bye now.